large ivory seizures contain important information that can provide intelligence to guide law enforcement officials. By analysing elephant ivory, it's possible to tell where and when the elephant was poached, its species, African or Asian, and subspecies, African forest or savanna, and conservatively estimate how many individual elephants were killed. However, to best achieve these goals, ivory seizures need to be properly sampled. This video demonstrates how to select and sample elephant ivory from large ivory seizures, and how to prepare and transport them to a laboratory for testing. Start by preparing an area that has enough space to lay out all the tusks and ivory pieces in the seizure. The work area should be cordoned off and secure. Make sure no unauthorized persons can access this area. Make sure it is protected, for example from rain, sun and wind. It should also be connected to an electricity supply for electric saws, lighting, etc. All information should be recorded and documented throughout the entire process. Start by recording all information you have about the ivory seizure, including the date the seizure was made, the location of the seizure, the name and agency of the person who made the seizure, and any known transit or suspected destination countries. If the seizure has a case number, record this as well. Include any other useful information or details about the seizure, such as how the ivory was discovered and how it was hidden. Next, record the date and location at which the sampling takes place, the name and contact details of the person recording the information. In case there are any questions afterwards, the scientist will know who to contact. Ivory seizures can range from one single item to hundreds of whole tusks and/or thousands of pieces of ivory. The ivory can come from many locations. It's not practical or necessary to sample every tusk for laboratory analysis. What is important, however, is to sample the ivory in a way that captures all the locations proportionately. Here we explain how to reduce the number of ivory pieces for sampling. For tusks cut into sections, keep only the base piece. The base is the end of the tusk closest to the jaw. Remove all other pieces of the tusk. These will not be sampled. Number each remaining tusk or tusk section and measure its diameter at the base. Write the tusk number and diameter measurement directly on the tusk using a permanent marker. You will need this information later. Record this information on the data sheet. Weigh the tusk and measure its length. Record these measurements on the data sheet. Use a new line on the data sheet to record information for each individual tusk. If the tusk has a CITES serial number, this should also be added to the data sheet. Repeat until every tusk or tusk section has been numbered, measured, weighed and recorded on the data sheet. It's best to analyse only one of the two tusks from the same elephant. Arrange the tusks from smallest to largest, using the diameter measurements written on each tusk. Paired tusks should be similar in size, colour and in the distance between the gum line and the base. The gum line is the mark showing where the tusk protruded from the skin. Rearrange neighbouring tusks so that as many as possible are matched according to these criteria: similar size, colour, gum line. When finished, remove every second tusk. These tusks will not be sampled. You will now be left with half the tusks. Divide the remaining tusks into groups based on shared external characteristics. Examples of groups include whole tusks versus tusks cut in sections, tusks with a lot of tissue remaining on them, tusks with burn marks starting at the gum line, tusks that are similarly coloured, example orange or white. Tusks with similar man-made markings, such as writing or numbers in the same colour ink. This step should only result in a small number of groups. It is possible that no characteristics can be used to group the tusks because all tusks look roughly the same. Give each group a letter and record the identifying characteristics of each group on the datasheet, explaining the characteristics of each group. For example, in Group B, all tusks were burned. In Group M, all tusks had marking in red pen. Write the group letter directly on the tusk with a permanent marker, next to the tusk number. Now, every tusk should be marked with an individual number and its group letter. Write each tusk's group letter on the datasheet next to the tusk number. If there are now more than 200 tusks or pieces of ivory, the number must be reduced to 200 by randomly selecting a tusk or piece of ivory from each group, repeating the process until a suitable number, that is 200, has been selected to be cut for laboratory analysis. Ivory is tested for origin and age by measuring its DNA and isotopes. Both analyses work best when the cut samples are at least 0.5 centimeters thick. To achieve that thickness, samples may need to be cut several centimeters from the base of the tusk, because the end of the base may be too thin. Each cut piece should measure approximately 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters and 0.5 to 1 centimeter thick. For each of the selected tusks or ivory pieces, label a container by writing the group letter and tusk number using a permanent marker. If the container is a vial, write the group letter and tusk number on both the side and the lid. It's useful to cut a piece of cardboard 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters to use as a template. Make sure that the cardboard template can fit in the labelled containers to ensure that the ivory pieces you eventually cut will also fit. Place the cardboard template on the area of the tusk where you will make your cut and draw around it. If tissue is visible, try to include it in the piece being cut, unless doing so makes the piece too thick. If you require more than one sample, use the template to draw additional areas to cut as needed. The easiest and fastest way to cut the piece of ivory is to use an electric circular saw with a fine-tooth blade. Use this saw tool to cut along the square or squares you have drawn onto the tusk. Immediately place the cut sample in its corresponding labelled container and close. When cutting the ivory, there will be a lot of dust. If you are in a closed environment, it might be helpful to use fans to blow the dust away from your group. Always wear a mask when the ivory is being cut. If the samples need to be sent abroad for laboratory analysis, the requirements of different countries should be considered and clarified with the laboratory performing the analysis. Some countries require the ivory samples to have been submerged in a decontaminating solution that kills any bacteria on the surface of the tusk. For example, samples to be sent to the United States of America must be soaked in a pH 10 solution for 2 hours to be permitted into the country. If a decontaminating solution is required, the laboratory performing the analysis should provide the solution. Depending on the number of samples to wash and the facilities available when cutting the samples, it may be easier to perform this washing step the day after all samples have been taken. Pour the decontaminating solution over the sample until the level of liquid in the container reaches approximately 1 centimeter high. Close the container lid tightly. Shake the container for at least 10 seconds to thoroughly coat the sample with the liquid. Let the solution sit for 2 hours and then pour off the liquid. This can be poured down the drain if followed with lots of running water. Do not greatly exceed the 2 hours, as this could have a negative effect on the laboratory analysis. Close the container lid tightly again. Documentation on letterhead attesting to this decontamination treatment must be sent to the laboratory with the samples. The following measures will help ensure that samples do not get damaged, delayed, lost, or refused entry to the analysing country. Line each box with a plastic bag. Place an absorbent liner inside the bag. Newspaper or other paper products can be used. Place all samples inside the bag, ensuring that all containers are tightly closed. Place a copy of the final data sheet inside the box with the samples. Externally reinforce the box with sturdy tape on all sides. The courier may request to see the contents, so only perform this step after the courier has agreed to accept it. Place a label on the outside of the box that has the laboratory's name and address. Special considerations are required when ivory samples are transported between different countries. Example, from the country of seizure to the country where the laboratory analysis will be performed. In cases where the origin or age of seized ivory from which samples are collected is not known, the specimens should be treated as CITES Appendix 1 specimens. It's vital that correct procedures are followed and precautions are taken, including obtaining the correct CITES import and export permits. It is critical that all required documentation is placed in an envelope marked Permits and that it's secured to the outside of the package using a protective transparent sleeve, for example a Ziploc bag, ensuring that the writing on the envelope can clearly be seen. Documentation must include A. The original CITES export permit issued by the CITES Management Authority of the exporting country, indicating the exact number of ivory samples and their description. For example, 200 ivory samples, each approximately 3 cm by 3 cm by 1 cm. Be sure to count these samples as individual pieces for the CITES form. Note: at the bottom of the CITES export permit, there's a box that must be stamped by customs just before the package is shipped. Otherwise, the permit is not considered valid and the samples could be confiscated by authorities before reaching the laboratory. B. The CITES import permit issued by the CITES Management Authority of the importing country. Original or copy as required. In the country of destination, the importing laboratory has to obtain the import permit and has to provide the necessary information on the purpose of the import to the management authority. The import permit will be provided to you by the laboratory. Please note, it's critical that the number of pieces of ivory being sent and their description be written identically on both the export and import permits. Additional documentation may be required depending on the destination laboratory and country. Some countries have put in place stricter domestic measures to regulate the import, export and re-export of specimens of CITES listed species. For this reason, officials or persons who have collected samples from seized ivory in one country for analysis at a forensic facility in a different country are encouraged to interact with the national CITES Management Authority of both countries, as well as the CITES Management Authority of any country through which the samples might pass in transit, to determine whether any of these countries has applicable domestic measures stricter than CITES. This is to ensure that all relevant legal requirements are met prior to shipment. The contact details of CITES management authorities can be accessed through the CITES website. Photocopy and scan all relevant documents and send via email to the laboratory prior to sending, to ensure they are correct, and in order to have a record in case the original documents accompanying the shipment get lost during transport. Inform the laboratory via email of the name of the courier and the tracking number for follow-up as appropriate. Clearly label both the outside and inside of each box that holds the samples to guard against problems arising if the outer label is removed or damaged. On the CITES import permit, a purpose code should be indicated on CITES import and export permits. The CITES Management Authority that issues the permit will determine whether to use purpose code S or L. Please use only S as the purpose code on the export CITES permit. Both import and export permits must be consistent. On Block 5, Special Conditions of the CITES export permit, you may note scientific samples for law enforcement analysis, no commercial value. The same phrase can be used on the bill of lading. Scientific samples for law enforcement analysis, no commercial value. An original signed USDA permit is required, together with a signed letter on the laboratory's letterhead, stating that the laboratory provided the decontaminating solution that the samples were submerged in. Write the courier tracking number on the blank line indicated in the letter. An original letter on your letterhead is also required, stating that all samples were submerged in the provided decontaminating solution. That is, state that samples were submerged in pH 10 preservative for 2 hours, after which the liquid was discarded. If you prepared the decontaminating solution yourself, you only need a letter stating that the decontaminating solution was prepared according to the specifications on the USDA permit. On the airway bill, mark the box indicating Broker Select and list the broker requested by the laboratory. Example: Expeditors in Seattle. The information contained in this document complements the guidelines on methods and procedures of ivory sampling and analysis, developed by the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime. The guidelines contain a template, ivory inventory, or datasheet on which to record relevant information and a list of equipment that you might find useful.